You can already hear the roars of dinosaurs in the distance. One might see them as ancient dragons, and others call them dino dragons. It's time to take a look at the new support of Tachikaze in the Raging Tactics. Stand up! Vanguard! Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another set breakdown, and today we're gonna start with the set breakdown of the Raging Tactics, a long-awaited set breakdown on the channel ever since we had a small break. And right off the bat we're gonna start off with Tachikaze, with their new and improved equip gauge mechanic. And let's take a look at all the new spicy cards that they got to improve this mechanic, as they needed some work to make their deck a lot more viable and a lot more consistent. And I think they got some nice tools in this package and maybe something to look forward to in the future. So let's start taking a look at all the new cards for Tachikaze. And we're gonna start it off with, of course, the reprint triggers as well starter, as they got the same old starter from the previous set. And because they are just generic reprints, I'm gonna give them only 1 star, as they don't really give something beneficial to the set as a whole. Now what does give some beneficial effect is the new third front trigger and third crit trigger they got. The third front they got is Savage Rowdy, and the third crit trigger that they got is Small Horn Dragon Babytops. And both of these cards are going to get 3 stars in my books, as this will allow you to play more with your trigger lineup and give some leeway to different kind of strategies if you want to focus more on fronts or want to focus more on crits with the early pressure with high damage. Then following up this generic path, we also got 2 new grade 2 vanillas, and the first one I want to talk about is Charged Dragon Dimetrospark. And this is the double crit grade 2 variant with only 3k power. On first glance, this doesn't really look to be as much because it's in an Exo clan, so we cannot really ramp up force numbers underneath it to make it a very powerful attacker. But with the tools that Tachikaze has available to it can use it in some regard. Namely, you can combine it with the new VR that can restand units, so you can have a unit that restands that has a natural double crit, meaning you will hit with 2 threatening attacks that will give your opponent either high damage or will waste them some cards. And yes, the low number on attack power might turn you off a bit, but we got other cards that can give this card immense amount of power, so it can still hit maybe for 28 or even steps above that. So in that regard, I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it does have some usefulness in Tachikaze. Then the second grade 2 vanilla that we got is Soundwave Dragon Tonetupuxu, and this is the 12k grade 2 variant with 0 shield. And this, in my opinion, is a bit worse than the previous one that we just talked about, as it is just a generic 12k vanilla, and it does what it does in every other clan, and we cannot really benefit more out of it. It's just a higher beater, and it's a good grade 2 right target for just more defensive capabilities. But besides that, it doesn't help you in any type of game plan or progression of your game plan. So for that, I'm only gonna give it 2 stars, as it's just super generic. Then they also got the grade 1 drop PG that will accompany with the third crit and third front, meaning we can drop the draw PG and get more room for the extra triggers. So this card will open up some more deck building options, and for that I'm definitely gonna give it 3 stars. And in their case, the name of this card is Savage Priestess. Then we go to the generic cards that can use in any type of deck, and we're gonna start off with a very interesting one, as this is the first time that we see something like this, and that is this grade 3 Savage Mercenary. And this has something unique on the card, and you already can see it. It's the incredible high base power, as it's a 27k unit. But with that base power, it does come with some restrictions. As its skills are continuous, you cannot normal write this card. So this is quite obvious that you cannot write the card, as having a 27k base power is pretty unfair against a lot of clans that cannot deal that amounts of power very consistent. But the interesting thing about it is that you can still write it if you could superior write it. In standard, this doesn't mean anything. We cannot use this in any type of shape or form. But for premium players, we have a old break write card or an old limit break card that allows you to write cards from your soul onto the Vanguard circle. So meaning if this card's in your soul and you activate that skill, you can use the skill to write it from the soul and you are sitting on a 27k base Vanguard. Is it useful? Probably not, because it's very slow and this one doesn't have a marker and the other cards also doesn't have a marker, and you're probably already dead in a premium aspect for how long that's gonna take, but it's a fun interaction nonetheless. And then this card does have a second ability, and that continues a rearguard circle. If you have no units with equip gauges in the same column as this unit cannot attack. So basically, to compensate for the high base power and also the high base attack that it can generate, you need to have a equip gauge in the column of this unit. So if it's on an Excel circle itself, it needs to have a equip gauge, otherwise it cannot attack. If it's in a normal column and you have a booster behind it, if the booster has an equip gauge, then it can still attack. So the trade-off is that you need to use equip gauges to allow this unit to attack, and you can override it. In general sense, I'm only going to give it 2 stars as it's quite obnoxious limitations, but the 27k base power might be useful in some regards, so it makes it not flat useless all around. Now next we have the grade 1 Whiptail Dragon, Bashercarno, and Bashercarno has the following skill: auto and rearguard circle. When the attack it boosted hits a Vanguard, cost, discard a card from your hand or 2 equip gauges and draw a card. So this card gives you some nice on hit pressure that allows you to cycle your hand, or you can get some pluses by sacrificing 2 equip gauges. So this card has some options to it, and this makes the card pretty flexible, and flexible cards are always good as it can be used in different kinds of strategies and different situations of a game state. So for that I'm gonna give it 3 stars as it's a pretty good solid grade 1. Might not be used in most decks, but the fact that you can use it in 2 different ways gives the card a lot of playability. The next we have another interesting grade 1, and that's Savage Augur, and her skill is interesting because her skill is auto and rearguard circle. Once per turn, cost, counterblast 1, and put an equip gauge on the bottom of your deck, and one of your units gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. The interesting part about this skill is that you can now return equip gauges back to your deck. This also combats the fact that you can accidentally equip some triggers from your deck and you don't want to have them equipped to your units, so to get some more more effectiveness out of them, you can now put them back to the deck. Sadly, it costs a counterblast, so you're limited in how many times you can do this. And as far as we have right now, we cannot really reshuffle our deck, so the triggers will be stacked on the bottom if we're using it for only putting triggers back onto the deck. So for that, I'm gonna give it 3 stars as the power gain is nice, but this card will mainly be used probably for refilling your deck and to put triggers back into the deck, so you can reuse some triggers and have more potential to drive check triggers, especially if you can last until the late game. Then next we have a very interesting grade 2 that is Savage Academian, and this grade 2 has the following skill: act on rearguard circle, cost, Soul Blast 1 and rest this unit, and call one of your units equip gauges to the rearguard circle. So where the previous grade 1 can put equip gauges back into your deck so you can refill your deck with triggers or combat deck out situations, this card can just use your equip gauges to generate units. So in a situation where you accidentally equipped your key unit or a vital card that you really need onto the field for that situation, well, then you can use this unit's ability to then call the unit onto the field for a Soul Blast. So this is another way to plus directly from equip gauges without first sacrificing units and getting the equip gauges to hand that we had to do with the previous support wave. So this is a nice addition as the unit will stay onto the field, so you can use Savage Academian on for the next turn as well, so as long as it stays on the field. The only downside to this card is that it's an 8k body on a grade 2, so you might be in a quite awkward position if this is your right target or when this is the only thing that you can call to put out some pressure against your opponent. So for that, I think it's a solid 4-star card as it combats the issue that we have with equip gauges where you accidentally equipped your key pieces that you actually need to have onto the field and not underneath one of your rear guards. The next we go into one of the main grade 3s of this set, and that is Deflagration Dragon Dark Rex, and its abilities are Act, Drop Zone. If your Vanguard is grade 2 or greater and you did not ride during this turn, cost, discard 2 equip gauges and write this card as stand or call to the rearguard circle. So this is unique because now we have a ride fix in Tachikaze where we can ride up to grade 3 if we do not have one in hand, and the only thing we have to do is sacrifice 2 equip gauges. So it's similar to the grade 1 that we just talked about with the on hit pressure that can discard 2 equip gauges for a draw, as this will also plus you 1 in that scenario. And if you ride it, that's also nice because it has an Excel marker, so if we have Excel 2, you get another plus out of it because you draw for your marker. The only downside that this ability has is that you cannot use it if you're already normal ridden that turn. So of course this is to prevent from riding on from grade 1 to grade 2 and then immediately use this card to ride up to grade 3. That's obvious. But in the late game, when we ride to another grade 3, we cannot resolve this skill anymore. And also, if we use this skill and we ride it and we have another one, we cannot call it then. So if we want to resolve multiple Dark Rexes from the drop zone, we need to call them onto the rearguard circle to be able to activate multiples. And the second ability of this card is continuous Vanguard to rearguard circle. During the battle it attacked, this unit gets power plus 2k for each of your equipped gauges. The important part here is that it doesn't count its own gauges only. It counts all the gauges you have spread around all your units. So if you have 10 gauges onto the field, this unit gets an increase of 20k. And that is pretty significant, as this thing can beat hard, especially with all the other cards that you're going to see that can generate a lot of gauges very quickly. So this allows you to have some nice hard beaters. The only issue with this card itself is that his first ability to resurrect it from the drop zone combats that goes against his second ability as you're sacrificing gauges. But then again, you are getting a plus if you call to the rearguard circle for that turn. Also, what's nice about this card is that it synergizes with the old support that sacrifices your own units, as you can sacrifice this and then get it back onto the field as you can resurrect it from the drop zone, so you can negate that minus as well. So this card allows you to negate minuses, play with other skills as well, fix your right issues, and have some nice solid beaters. So I think it's an overall pretty solid card, and I think it's a solid 4 stars for that matter. Then next we got one of my favorite cards in this set for Tachikaze, and that's Armored Mammoth. And its skill is on a rearguard circle. When it attacks, discard all of this unit's equipped gauges, and until the end of the battle, when your opponent would call cards from his or her hand to the Guardian Circle, he or she must call the same number of cards as the number of equipped gauges discarded for this cost, or more at the same time. So basically what this card is, it's your build your own battle door effect. If this card has 3 gauges and you discard them all, your opponent needs to guard with 3 cards at the time if they want to guard against this thing. If it has 5 gauges, they need to guard with 5 cards from hand to guard against this thing. So you can see how this thing can spiral out of control if it has too many gauges equipped to it and your opponent doesn't have the right amount of cards in their hand. If they have a hand set of 7 and you give this card 7 equip gauges, they need to waste their entire hand to only guard against this unit, and then you have still your other attacks left. Yes, getting this card 7 gauges might be a little bit tricky, but we do have a lot more equipped gauge acceleration in this set, so getting certain amounts, maybe 4 or 5 gauges onto this card might not be that impossible as you might think, as you're gonna see in a second. So this card has a lot of playability, and it also interacts really well with old cards like Savage Raider that can move gauges from one unit to another. So you can screw with your opponent's mind thinking this card has only 2 equipped gauges, and then mid-combat he's guarding against your attacks in a certain way to accompany that double battle door effect. But then mid-battle you use Savage Raider to switch your gauges onto this unit and suddenly it has 5 gauges. And your opponent didn't calculate that correctly and now they cannot guard against this attack and they die because they were sitting at 5 damage, and this one will deal a damage no matter the circumstances at that point. So for that, I think it's a solid 4-star card. It does need support from the deck itself because it doesn't work on its own. But if you can build the right toolbox for this card can be pretty insane and your opponent doesn't know what's gonna hit them. Then next we have a card that is a warm welcome for a lot of Tachikaze players, as they had a lot of resource issues, especially with the previous deck where Soul as well as Counterblast was limited, and the same can be said about equip gauges. So with the introduction of this card, we can see a lot of potential for Tachikaze, as this grade 1 Sharp Thorn Dragon Polacanspine fixes some issues, as its skill is auto. When retired from rearguard circle, activate all of the effects below according to the total number of your equip gauges. 1 or more, Soul Charge 1. 2 or more, Counter Charge 1. 3 or more, move all of this card's equip gauges to one of your other rear guards. So this card allows you to soul charge, counter charge, and it allows you to regain your equip gauges that were on this unit and give them to another unit that can potentially benefit more out of them. So think about cards like Mega Rex or even Def Rex that can use these cards and that can use these equip gauges to get more power out of them. Even Savage King, the old combination where you could generate a lot of powerful attacks, will benefit from a grade 1 like this that can swap these gauges around, give you soul, give you counterblast, which allows you to sustain your onslaught a couple of turns longer, which you couldn't do with the previous card. So all in all, this would be a solid 5-star card because it fixes a lot of problems. But the downside is that all the new support in this set doesn't actually interact well with this card, as this card needs to be retired from the rearguard circle, meaning either your opponent needs to retire it, which it probably won't if it has gauges equipped to it, so you need to retire it yourself. But all of the support in this set doesn't really retire your own stuff. That was only secluded to the previous support. So this card will fix and upgrade the old deck, but it won't interact well with the new card. So for that matter, instead of giving it 5 stars, which I will only give it 4 stars, as it is a solid resource engine for Tachikaze on all fronts. But currently we cannot use it as effectively as we want to. But maybe with another support wave, when we go back to self-sacrificing, then maybe this card will be a solid piece. And even though it's a 7k body, that won't matter, as the resources is way more important than just this 1k extra power onto the unit. Now that we talked about cards that can interact well with the equip gauges, let's take a look at the new cards that can generate them and potentially use them for powerful attacks. We're going to start off with this grade 2 Turbo Smilodon, and its skill is auto Vanguard and rearguard circle when placed, or when it attacks a Vanguard, you may put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for one of your rear guards. So this card allows you to generate equip gauges and spread them wherever you want. That is a big plus. And also what's great about this card is when it enters the field, it will generate 2 equip gauges, because the turn you place or ride it, it generates 1, and then when you attack it that turn, it generates another one, so that's 2. And after the turn, it will generate 1 equip gauge each and every single turn. And because it's not mandatory to gain the equip gauge, you can set the pace and prevent deck out in certain situations where you're almost out of cards. So in my books, it's a solid 4-star card, as it's a gigantic upgrade for the equip gauge mechanic, as it can turbo out these equip gauges very efficiently, and it does its name justice. Then next we have a grade 3 variant of Turbo Smilodon, and that is Fiery Light Dragon Opticalcerato. And its skill is pretty much 1-to-1, as its skill is auto Vanguard the rearguard circle when placed, or when it attacks a Vanguard, you may put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for one of your rearguards. So it is identical to the grade 2, the only difference is it's a grade 3 and it does have the Excel marker. But because it's a grade 3, this skill won't be as useful in most decks, because your grade 3 lineup is mostly saved up for your main attackers or your main boss units, and this doesn't really fit well with it. But it can be a good support grade 3 if you want to focus on only one Vanguard unit, as this will work on the rearguard as well, and it could be a backup right target for a turn where you want to set up your equip gauges as fast and efficiently as possible. So it does have its uses, and for that I think it's a solid 3-star card. The next we have a grade 1 that has some utility options for the equip gauge mechanic, as well as can generate them, and I'm talking about this grade 1 Light Blade Dragon Zandilopho, and its skill is on a rearguard circle. Cost, rest this unit, choose one of your rear guards and put the top card of your deck face down as equip gauge for that unit. Or move all of one of your rear guards equip gauges to that unit. Then cost, counterblast 1, and the chosen unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So this card allows you to do a couple of things. One, it allows you to generate gauges for a rested unit, so you don't have to pay resources, and you can do this turn after turn, because every time you stand it, you can rest it and get another gauge. But the other thing you can do is, instead of generating gauges so you can pace out yourself a little bit more efficiently, you can move your gauges from units which you think aren't really using them anymore and give them to another unit that will use them more efficiently. So you have more control over your gauges onto your field. That's always a big plus. Then, besides whatever choice you did, you could then counterblast 1 and give the selected unit an additional 5k power, and this can be nice in combination with other cards like the Savage Academian that's only an 8k. Combined with this, it can become a 13k attacker, and giving an equip gauge or moving cards to it, you can reload it with a potential good target which you want to resurrect and make it a unit. It also works well with Arm of Mammoth, as not only do you give it gauges, but you also give it a 5k power, meaning it's a 14k attacker, and that will be just enough to hit the opponent's Vanguard. And if they don't have interceptors, that's more than enough power. And there are many more ways that you can use this card, so I think it's a solid 3-star card, as it has a lot of beneficial effects, and it can be a solid gauge management tool for your deck, and it can be a center line for that matter. Then we get to the part where we're going to talk a bit more about power, and we're going to start off with this grid 1 Angry Roar Dragon Roarbaryo, and its skills on a Rearguard Circle. When placed, costs Soul Blast 1 and put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for one of your other rearguards, and that unit gets power plus 5k until the end of turn for each of its equip gauges. So this card not only generates equip gauges on the moment it enters the field, but it can give that specific unit an immense power boost if it already has a couple of gauges equipped to it. So if it already has 3 gauges and you use the skill and it gets another one, it will get an increase of power of 20k. Meaning you can build some solid beaters out of nothing quite effectively and pretty early on in the game as well. And because you can give it to any type of unit, this can be a very solid booster to certain units with nasty on attack skills or nasty Vanguard specific skills or nasty guard restrictions that can put your opponent in a very awkward position. So this card has a lot of use and is therefore a solid 3-star card. The only downside is that it's an on-place effect, so once you used it, you can no longer use it, and it does cost a Soul Blast, so you need to be careful with your resources when using this card. The next we have a grade 2 that is Deflagration Dragon Bomb Raptor, and its skill is on a Rearguard Circle. Once per turn, when your opponent's rearguard is retired during your turn, put the top card of your deck face down as an equip gauge for this unit, and you may have this unit get power plus 5k until the end of turn for each of this unit's equip gauge. So this is similar to the Roarbaryo, only difference is that the power increase is on this unit itself, so when you stay on the field for a couple of turns, you can still keep getting the insane power gain. And not only does it gain power, it also gets the gauges, so every single turn you are keeping this unit onto the field, the power gain will increase with 5k each and every single time if you do not give it more gauges with other units as well. The only condition is that you need to retire something. Well, you can do this through a couple of means. You can either attack into a rearguard with another unit, as it doesn't specify that you need to retire it through a skill. You also have Deflagration from the previous support that can retire something in the front row from your opponent's field, so it interacts with that as well. But we can also combine with the new VR that can retire stuff from your opponent's field, so on demand, so you can give this unit on demand the power increase that you want to. So this can be a very solid beater, as it can become a 90k, 24 or 29 very early, very easily, and that can be pretty devastating for your opponent if they cannot remove this unit pretty quickly or early on. But now we get to an interesting grade 2 that can be one of the more deadly cards in this set, and that is Clear Out Dragon Sweeper Acro Kanto. And it got 2 skills, and these are pretty devastating. As its first skill is on a Rearguard Circle, once per turn, when it attacks a Vanguard, put the top card of your deck face down as a equip gauge for this unit. So very simple one, you attack and you can give it an equip gauge. But the secret lies in its second ability, as its second ability is continuous Rearguard Circle. This unit gets power plus 5k for each of this unit's equip gauges. And if it has 3 or more equip gauges, it cannot be chosen by your opponent's card abilities. So this thing can be an incredible beater during either player's turn, as this continuous skill is active during either player's turn. So with 3 equip gauges, this thing is 24k. So that is pretty hard to deal with, but also it will then have resist against removal skills. So your opponent cannot choose this card for removal, so the only way to get rid of it is either beat into it with a stronger unit or have non-targetable removal skills available to you to then remove this card from the field. Otherwise, this thing will spiral out of control, as each and every single turn it will gain an equip gauge and gain 5k power, 5k power, 5k power, if you just leave it alone. because you can use other cards from your deck to give this card even more equip gauges, even faster, to get this thing to 54k if you want to, and then start beating your opponent with solid beaters that they probably cannot deal with at certain points. So this thing is an insane card that is definitely 5 stars in my book, as it's a hard removal card that your opponent cannot easily interact with or get rid of, and it's only getting stronger and stronger and stronger each single turn it's onto the field. And if you can get this thing on grade 2 on the board, and you can start snowballing out of control, you will win the game pretty soon afterwards. Now, with everything said and done, let's take a look at the final card of the set, their new VR that will round up this support, and you get a good glimpse on how the new support is supposed to interact with each other. And their new VR is none other than Thundering Sword Dragon Anger Blader. And this grade 3 has 2 solid skills. Its first skill is Act on Vanguard Circle, cost, put a rearguard face down as an equip gauge for another rearguard, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So basically, you can put one rearguard, disassemble it, and put all the spare parts and put them onto another rearguard and give them more power, because a lot of units will gain more power. So you can put your rearguards onto Sweeper Acrocanto or on a specific units that you then target with Roarbaryo, or you can put it on Bomb Raptor to give them insane amounts of power, as you can ramp up the amount of gauges. And then you also get the fact that you can retire something. So this will interact with Bomb Raptor, which will then proc its skill. So this skill alone is a good interaction with targets for Roarbaryo, Sweeper Acrocanto and Bomb Raptor, as you can really pump up the amount of power onto the field. And it can generate a lot of equip gauges, as you can then use that for fuel for other cards that can use them, like the new Dark Rex. But there's another thing. The fact that you put rearguards onto another rearguard means you don't really retire them, so this is the reason why it won't interact with the new grade 1, but the fact that you can put rearguards underneath them, if you still have rearguards that you already used and aren't really useful for that turn, you can then get the more value out of them. For example, Zandilopho and Savage Academian, as the moment you use them, they are then rested, and for the turn they are useless. So if you want to get more use out of them, you can then use this VR Anger Blader skill to then put them as an equip gauge on another unit and get more value out of that specific card. And speaking of Savage Academian, you can do quite an interesting mini loop between the two cards, as you can use one Savage Academian to then recall a unit onto the field by resting it, and then if you have another Savage Academian onto the field, you can then put the rested Savage Academian onto your still standing Academian, and then for that moment you can retire something off your opponent's unit, and then you can use the still standing Savage Academian to rest it, then recall the Savage Academian. So basically, by doing that loop infinitely until you run out of your soul, because every interaction will cost you soul, you can retire one unit of your opponent's field, because every time you equip something by using Anger Blade skill, you can retire a rearguard from your opponent's field. So you can use soul for trade-off against your opponent's rearguard. So that is an interesting interaction. It probably won't be the most efficient and most played interaction, but it's a fun thing to do nonetheless. But with that said, let's take a look at the second ability, as that is actually the meat of this potato, as its skill is Auto and Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, costs Counterblast 1, stand free of your rearguards with 3 or more equip gauges each, and all of your front row units gets power plus 5k until the end of turn. So for one counterblast, you can restand potentially 3 units and give your entire front row plus 5k. So your Vanguard will always hit for 70k, meaning it will hit and beat over normal force units. But the main thing is about that it can restand 3 of your units. And the fact that you need to have 3 equip gauges to them might be a bit harsh, but as you have seen with all the extra acceleration for equip gauges, it won't be that difficult to at least get 1 or 2 units with 3 equip gauges on turn 3 and then potentially restand them. And if you can target them with one of your high beat sticks like Bomb Raptor, the target for Roarbaryo, or more importantly, Sweeper Acrocanto, you can see some devastating attacks that your opponent probably won't be able to deal with. And if you can do this on your first grade 3 turn while your opponent is still grade 2, yeah, that might be lights out for them, and you can already win the game at that point, as this thing is pretty devastating, and the extra 5k on all your units is just the icing on top, and it makes the whole thing perfect. So this card is, in my books, definitely a 5-star card, as you can, as the fact that you can reset any type of unit, so anything that has a solid on attack skill or a nasty guard restriction, and with all the extra power gain, and also the fact that you can generate a lot of equip gauges very quickly and efficiently, gives the card a lot of options and can be a centerpiece for a lot of different decks, and will probably be used in sets to come, even though when we get more Tachikaze support, this thing could still be used in the long term. And that's everything for the Tachikaze support. We have seen a lot of interesting stuff. We have seen some generic support, even something that works with the old support with the extra resource engine, and that could be a potential future centerpiece for new support when we get back to this self-sacrificing mechanic. And more importantly, we saw this new playstyle with Anger Blader with all these high powered units and this super acceleration of equip gauges. And this is going to be one of the more aggressive things that we have seen for Axel decks, as this thing can win very easily on turn 3 if you get a good enough hand. And that's the main issue. It still lacks in the consistency part, as we can high roll as crazy, but we need our cards in hand. And that rounds up everything for this set review for Tachikaze in the latest set, the Raging Tactics. Or I should have said latest set if this video was out 1 month ago. But nonetheless, it's a very interesting support set for Tachikaze's players. And let me know in the comments down below what you guys find of these new cards for Tachikaze. You probably already have played around with them in quite a bit, so you have a good understanding of how these cards might interact with each other. So let me know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. As always, this video has brought to you by our lovely Patreons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. If you do want to support the channel, you can do that, of course, by going to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one!